Let us now look at the dynamics of groups or teams. A group implies that certain characteristics are shared amongst those present, which sets them aside from others and which gives them a sense of belonging. It also implies shared goals, values, interests and motives. Within any team or group, individuals have to work together, and a different attitude is required, sometimes called groupthink. A flexibility of thought, an ability to listen to others, and an appreciation of mutual interdependence are some of the factors required to make an effective team. When a team works well together, there is said to be group cohesion. The effectiveness of an individual within the group depends on several factors, personality being one, which we have already considered. Other factors include ability, status, and role. The ability of an individual to complete a task depends on many things: his knowledge, his experience, and his application to the task. It is how others perceive his ability, in conjunction with his interactive style, which will determine what others in the team think of him. People will more readily accept deficiencies in personality, such as a coarse nature, if they perceive an ability to do the job properly. Conversely, someone who is incompetent, as well as having a poor interactive style, will not be a good team player. Individual status will play a large part in the decision-making process within the team. So, a captain's opinion will carry more weight than that of a first officer. However, status can be dangerous on a flight deck if no one is willing to challenge the decisions of a captain, especially one who is authoritarian. Different cultures value status differently. In Western cultures, challenging authority is regarded almost as character building, whereas Far Eastern cultures respect status immensely, and challenging the captain would be unthinkable. The third factor which determines interpersonal behaviour within the team is role. On the flight deck, the role of a pilot changes, depending upon whether they are the handling pilot, that is the one flying, or the non-handling pilot, who will speak to air traffic and perform other tasks. A person's role will also influence other people's expectation of how that role should be fulfilled. For example, a captain would be expected to behave soberly when the whole crew goes out for a meal, and wild behaviour, on his part, would undermine his authority. The last two factors that we have looked at, role and status, may be the cause of conflict. For example, two senior captains on a flight deck will have to fulfill different roles, one as captain, the other as co-pilot. Both individuals would have to manage such a situation properly. Let us now look at group behaviour. Where time permits, decisions made by a group will tend to be better than the average decision by a member of that group. The group's problem-solving ability will, however, seldom improve on the problem-solving ability of the ablest member of the group. When decisions are made by a group, certain behaviour patterns have been observed, not all of which are conducive to making the best decisions. For example, people like to conform to the majority view. The greater the majority in favour of one proposal, the less likely it is that individuals will propose an alternative, especially if it is radically different. Compliance, that is agreeing with a request, depends very much upon the way the request is posed. If a request is made, for example, that crews accept a cut of 10% in their allowances, it is more likely to be complied with if an earlier request had been made for a cut of 15%, or if a cut of 5% had already been agreed. Persuasion has no place in group decision-making. If differences of opinion cannot be solved by airing the problem and coming to a logical conclusion, the group cannot be said to be working effectively. Risky shift describes how groups of individuals are more likely to make risky decisions than individuals on their own. The reason for this behaviour is twofold. The individual feels he can share the blame if something goes wrong when he is in a group, and those with risky views are likely to be more influential. Group duration will also have an effect on decisions. It used to be the practice, especially in the military, for crew members to remain together for several flights, known as constituted crews. It had the advantage that the members got to know and depend upon each other. However, there were the far greater disadvantages of complacency and the fact that new crew members could not rely on standard procedures, as the old crew may have modified them to suit themselves. The practice in commercial airlines is not to have constituted crews, so that bad habits are not developed. Consequently, in a large airline, flight crews might fly together only once or twice in their career. Within teamwork, we need to distinguish between coordination, coaction, and cooperation, although there is considerable overlap. Everyone in the company will have the same goal, namely the profitability of the company, but individuals' interaction will be different. Coordination describes the formal allocation of separate dependent tasks, such as one pilot being the handling pilot, while the other completes the other tasks. Coaction is defined as working in parallel, and largely independently, towards a common goal. On board an aircraft, the flight and cabin crew have different tasks, which are largely independent. However, they both have the same goal, namely the safe and efficient completion of the flight. Cooperation means generally working together, but not necessarily at the same task, and perhaps with considerable overlap. For example, the flight crew may have been told that they can have an earlier landing slot. This will necessitate the cabin crew cooperating by speeding up their cabin service, in order to make the cabin secure for landing. The dynamics of groups have been studied a great deal by many organisations, such as the military, large financial companies and universities, because of the need to reduce errors in group decision-making. Here are some of the guidelines generally accepted for improving decision-making in groups. Avoid arguing for your personal judgments, as you may not be right. Approach the task on the basis of logic. Avoid changing your mind only in order to reach agreement or to avoid conflict. You are a member of a team and your input is required. Avoid conflict-reducing techniques, such as a majority vote or middle course strategy. Make the correct decision, not just an acceptable decision. View differences of opinion as helpful rather than a hindrance to decision-making. In addition to these guidelines, continuous training is an accepted part of improving decision-making. Simulator training, crew resource management, CRM training, also called multi-crew cooperation, MCC training, and line-oriented flying training, LOFT, are all ways of improving crew standards. These courses are practical in nature and frequently involve team games. They deal with what are generically called human factors, that is, the topics which we are considering in this CBT course: decision-making, types of error, and so on. An essential member of any group is the leader, whether he is the chairman of a committee or the captain of an aeroplane. Leadership can be defined as the ability to get work done with and through others, while at the same time winning their confidence, respect, loyalty, and willing cooperation. No one is born a leader, and like other skills, leadership can be learned and developed. A good leader will tend to have the following characteristics: social maturity, self-motivation, achievement orientation, self-confidence, and communication skills. The three most important guidelines for a leader to follow in order to reach the best decision and to maintain the morale of the team are: he should avoid giving any indication of his own opinion at the outset of any discussion, as this will hamper open discussion. He should solicit the views of the others and look for doubts and dangers. He should explain why a decision has been made and why other suggestions were not implemented. In other words, he should make everyone feel part of the team.